I saw they were covering the Turning Point conference, and they were saying everybody who's there is an extremist. You heard The View, which is supposed to be like a slice. I mean, it's psychologically operating as, hey, this is what everybody in America, in the female world, is supposed to think. And yet every person on there is calling people going to Turning Point USA's Tampa conference right here in Central Florida. They were saying they were extremists. And then they depicted some group or two people or something had Nazi symbols. And they said, they're all Nazis now. They're all Nazis if they have people in front of the building. I mean, you could pay somebody $1 to put Nazi symbols and go in front of the DNC and say, hey, look, the Democrat Party's all Nazis now. Denounce it, Democrats. That's so stupid. Like, what dumb fool is stupid and shallow and wicked enough to buy into that kind of stupid trick? The only people who are supporting Nazis literally right now are people who support the Azov Battalion and those people who love Nazi insignia and use it as they hide in front of civilians in a war over which oligarchs are going to run that country in Ukraine. That's the people who support Nazis. And that goes back to a theme that I've talked about a lot over the years, which is, why is it that the government always wants to call its dissidents the very thing that they're in the process of funding and allying with? Have you noticed that? You had that before. You had that with the story of 9/11 and that event. They came out and said, if you do not support the Patriot Act, you are a terrorist enabler. Dick Cheney, Dick Cheney is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party and the Republican establishment. There is nothing distinguishing the policies between Dick Cheney and Nancy Pelosi. Anything is a minutia detail. In terms of difference. But we are told that's our frame of what we're allowed to pick from. It's either Dick Cheney or Nancy Pelosi, and they all think the same. Even the people who are supposed to be the dissidents on the left, AOC and that team, they turned out to be perfectly willing to go along with Nancy Pelosi's corporate fascism and warmongering and bloody foreign policy of wickedness and neo-imperialism. But they have this tendency after 9/11, if you didn't support suspension of habeas corpus, if you didn't support black sites where they tortured people, if you didn't support every war, the Iraq war, Afghanistan war, if you didn't support the surge, you were always called a terrorist enabler. And those same people were supporting Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups like ISIS in Libya and Syria. At the same time, those who opposed their support and enabling of those groups at home were being called terrorist enablers. This is classic projection. It's Saul Alinsky garbage, if you want to call it that, but it's not just him. I don't want to really go there. It predates him, this tactic that ugly, lawless anarchists in government use. They do the same thing. They project onto their victims what they are. They're the ones who supported Al-Qaeda in Libya. They're the ones who opened up the prisons during the Libyan bloody insurrection coup that they financed and supported and executed with NATO for thugs. They're the ones that did that in Libya. They're the ones that opened up the prisons with terrorists. They're the ones that were moving weapons in Benghazi through over to Syria to support al-Nusra and ISIS and Al-Qaeda in their attempt to absolutely viciously savage Christians in Syria. That's what the United States government did while they kept calling anybody who said, hey, please stop. We don't want wars. We hired you to take care of our country, not to bankrupt us in terrible, horrible, wicked, lawless wars. Please stop. And they would say, silence, you terrorist enabler, as they enabled Muslim terrorists, Islamic terrorists. And then they attacked peaceful Muslims here at home who had nothing to do with their stupid extremism they were supporting. D.C. had been supporting extremism and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 80s. And then you go to today. And again, if you go to Turning Point, you see young people of all kinds of backgrounds and race and all kinds of different, perspectives and angles at that event. But they're all Nazis if they don't support funding Azov Battalion and the Nazi elements around them. So how does that work? How at what point do people say this is an abusive relationship between people who say they're public servants but are not serving the public but serving private special interests, and then abusing people who say, hey, I'm going to have to call you out on that, sir. We do not want war. They say, you are Nazi. Wait a second. You just sent a paycheck to a Nazi to have weapons to train and to get more people recruited to Nazism over abroad, and probably that's spilling here at home. You guys are the ones enabling Nazism. We're the ones trying to stop the funding of that crap. How dare you lie like a psychopath, but that's what D.C. does. They're lying. They're projecting what they are onto their victims. It's disgusting. We should be ashamed of this stuff. The liberals go along with it, They call you a Nazi if you don't believe in force vaccinating children. I mean, ridiculous. With a garbage product that doesn't work on the variants that are running around. They call you a Nazi if you say that the government is doing lawless, ridiculous gain-of-function experiments that unleash these plagues onto people. They call truckers Nazis if they say, hey, please don't forcibly inject us with an experimental product with legal liability, making billionaires even richer. That's what leftist is today? That's not left. That's conservative reactionary. That's conservative reactionary policy. There's nothing progressive about today's left. What's left of the left is just reactionary conservation of the establishment. Don't you dare touch the FDA, expand its powers. Don't you dare touch the WHO, expand their money and loot and corporate powers. Right? It's all about protecting and running interference for the established order that's old and decrepit and over 100 years old with these institutions.